Robinson has some room. Robinson, there he goes.
Underneath throw. Robinson, the workhorse.
I think it's more about just moving on. I'll say the communication was really not there. I feel like they're using my not feeling healthy or as an excuse, I guess.
Do you remember the name James Robinson? I certainly do. He came onto the NFL scene strong and had many thinking he'd be the next great running back. However, things changed faster than they could even begin. This is the rise and fall of James Robinson. Let's take you back to college. And no, I don't mean you, I mean the time when James Robinson was in college. See, Robinson started playing straight away as a true freshman while attending Illinois State. He missed a few games due to injury and ultimately got buried under the depth chart, but still managed 322 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 63 carries. As a sophomore, he quickly became the starter in the backfield and was named first team All-Missouri Valley Football Conference with 933 yards and 12 touchdowns. The numbers bumped up again in his junior year, with him then rushing for 1,290 yards and 12 more touchdowns, once again getting named to the first team All-Missouri Valley Football Conference. Wow, that is just a mouthful. Robinson also became a finalist for the Walter Payton Award in his junior year. And finally, in his senior year, needing to make a name for himself, he ran for 1,899 yards and 18 touchdowns. This very easily got him named to the first team FSC All-American squad. So with those 4 years out of the way, he was throwing his name into the NFL draft with 4,444 career rushing yards, the second most in school history. Unfortunately, James went through the entire draft without hearing his name yet called. Almost immediately after the draft concluded, though, the Jacksonville Jaguars called him to let him know they would be signing him. This was probably the best situation for him because in 2020 the Jaguars were really thin at the position. I looked up their depth chart and oh my, they had a backfield that consisted of Dare Ogunbowale, Devine Ozigbo, Chris Thompson, Craig Reynolds, and Nathan Cottrell. Adding Robinson was integral to their attempt to shore up that very glaring hole on their offense. And let me tell you, he did far more than just shore up the position, he transformed it. By the end of training camp, Robinson was easily named as the starting running back on the roster, and he did not look back. Throughout the course of his rookie season, which saw him play 14 games, Robinson had 240 rushes for 1,070 yards and 7 touchdowns. He also contributed through the air, hauling in 49 receptions for 344 yards and 3 more touchdowns. This allowed him to become the 4th undrafted player in league history to rush for over 1,000 yards in their rookie season. For those wondering, the only other players who accomplished this were Dominic Rhodes, LeGarrette Blount, and Philip Lindsay. Remember Lindsay? Yeah, I have a lot to say about Lindsay, but let's just save that for a separate video. Anyways, Robinson was also able to achieve the record for the most scrimmage yards for any rookie free agent in league history. He was named to the PFWA All-Rookie team, and his peers listed him inside the NFL Top 100 that year. I mean, he got ranked at 100, but still, he made it. Now, his numbers were great, but my goodness was the team not. The Jacksonville Jaguars went an abysmal 1-15 that season under head coach Doug Marrone. They were 30th in points scored and 31st in points allowed. Absolutely nothing went right for this roster, and it was the last that we saw of Doug Marrone as the team's shot caller, which wasn't entirely surprising at the time. Then enter Urban Meyer. Now time to head back into the past a little bit because Meyer has some, well, let's just say a storied history. The first thing worth mentioning is that Meyer once coached the Florida Gators and spent 6 seasons as the head coach. During that time frame, a whopping 31 players on the team were arrested. Not at the same time, of course, that would have been insane, but it's still a ridiculously high number. On a more serious note, Meyer also had to take a leave of absence during his stretch with the Gators due to a hospital visit, where he cited chest pains. The medical scare eventually led to him resigning as the coach, and he even came out and said, "I have ignored my health for years, but recent developments have forced me to reevaluate my priorities of faith and family." He took the remainder of that season off, but did return the following year with the Gators. And then, well, things got worse. Sporting News released an expose that was called How Urban Meyer Broke Florida Football. The entire expose was suggesting that Meyer created a toxic environment in Florida and left before it could blow up in his face. Inside the story, there were multiple Florida players who were quoted saying Myers created a circle of trust that only involved the star players, who received better treatment as well. Meyer denied the claims, though his reputation took a massive blow at the time. He left Florida and started working at ESPN, and that didn't last long. He almost immediately left to take on the head coaching gig at Ohio State. After a few great seasons with Ohio State, Meyer later got placed on paid administrative leave due to reportedly knowing about spousal abuse allegations for his assistant coach. Meyer was suspended by the team for the first 3 games after reviewing the case further, and by the end of the season, he said that he'd retire from coaching altogether. And now, we're back to the present. He spent a few years outside of the coaching world and came back to coach the Jacksonville Jaguars. The same Jaguars that went 1-15 the year prior. And oh my lord, was this an absolute train wreck. Well, you might be wondering why I even bring this up in a video about the rise and fall of James Robinson, and do not worry, I will be getting to that. Before we get into all the dirty details, let's catch you up on how the Jaguars' first NFL draft went with Meyer at the helm. Holding the first overall pick, they selected Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence. Later in that same round, they selected Clemson running back Travis Etienne at pick 25. Those were the 2 most important selections for this story on James Robinson. See, everybody knew that Lawrence would go number 1 overall. That felt like a layup. The surprise was Etienne. Just think about it for a second. Why would you use a premier first-round draft pick on probably the only position that did well the season prior? In Meyer's head, it felt simple. Draft Etienne because it'll make Lawrence happy while simultaneously allowing him to come into the NFL with his former backfield mate and friend. So, I guess it wasn't a terrible choice, and it did allow for some healthy competition in the backfield. Ultimately, though, the drafting of Etienne was delayed, with him suffering a season-ending injury before even getting onto the field. This immediately locked Robinson in as the starter for the 2nd straight year, and something that Jaguars fans were still happy about. I mean, he was a very talented running back. Apparently, Meyer didn't think so. Despite everybody seemingly loving what Robinson brought to the table, Meyer sidelined him in exchange for other veterans. And for a team that's rebuilding, benching a possible star running back who just entered the league is a little ridiculous. In the season opener, Robinson had only 5 carries for 25 yards. Meanwhile, veteran Carlos Hyde had 9 carries for 44. This was a trend that continued sporadically for the rest of the season, with some weeks Robinson being the lead back and others Meyer just completely disregarding him. Thankfully, for weeks 2 through 7, Robinson was the focal point of the offense again, leading the team in rushing in each of those weeks and even having one game where he went for 150 yards. Unfortunately, the team did lose all but one of those games, with that victory coming against the Miami Dolphins in week 6, then something snapped again. Robinson had just 4 carries for 22 yards in the following game. Meanwhile, Carlos Hyde had 9 carries for 32. Now, the following week Robinson did miss with injury, and Hyde picked up 21 carries for 67 yards. He was notably less productive, yet the team kept randomly giving him more work. The week after, Robinson came back to 12 rushes for 57 yards and a touchdown, though Jamal Agnew, Carlos Hyde, and Laviska Shenault combined for 7 more carries. The following 2 weeks were led by Robinson again, then back to Hyde, and back to Robinson. All the while, the team was completely floundering out of control in the background. Towards the later end of the season, the team was 2-11, and stories were coming out about head coach Urban Meyer that did not paint him in a positive light. This was most notable with kicker Josh Lambo. Lambo publicly accused Myers of physical abuse, mentioning that Meyer had kicked Lambo's leg during warm-ups in the preseason. Lambo was frustrated and told Meyer not to touch him again, while also mentioning how it was inexcusable for a boss to treat his employees this way. Lambo then accounted that Meyer responded with, "I'm the head ball coach, I'll kick you whenever the F I want." Lambo reported this incident to the Jaguars, and within hours of it coming out to the public, Myers was fired. The week after Myers got fired, James Robinson took the complete bulk of the work, receiving 18 carries and turning them into 75 yards and a touchdown. At this point, it looked like he'd be the focal point once more now that Meyer was finally out of the building. Sadly, the second week after Myers' firing, Robinson tore his Achilles in the first quarter. Talk about some serious bad luck. His injury came at a bad time also, as the timetable for recovery would have him missing multiple weeks into the regular season the following year, and it wouldn't allow him to compete with Travis Etienne in training camp. In that next offseason, the team hired a new coaching staff led by Doug Peterson, and Etienne came back healthy for training camp. It was clear that Peterson and the rest of the coaching staff loved what they saw from Etienne and started the season with him. Sadly, Peterson never really allowed Robinson to show why he belonged on the roster. By the time Robinson was working his way back from the injury, the team traded him to the New York Jets once their running back Breece Hall suffered a season-ending injury.
I'll say the communication was really not there. I feel like they're using my not feeling healthy or as an excuse, I guess. So.
Jacksonville didn't even get much compensation, with just a 6th-rounder coming in return. New York did give Robinson a chance towards the end of the season, playing him in 4 games, and in those 4 games, since returning from his Achilles injury, he had 110 carries for 425 yards and 3 touchdowns, along with 11 catches for 51 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. The man was still producing and very capable of helping in the passing game, though the Jets didn't bother attempting to re-sign him in free agency when the season ended. His next stop came with the New England Patriots, who signed him to a 2-year, $8 million contract. The team wanted him to be a possible replacement for Damian Harris, who had just left to go to the Buffalo Bills, but it didn't work out well. Robinson got waived just a few months later due to the team reportedly having concerns regarding his health. This led to Robinson joining the New York Giants a month later. He spent training camp there, and after exactly 1 month since his signing, the team released him. The journey continued like this, with him later signing with the Green Bay Packers practice squad for a little, before getting released and re-signed again and then released again. This went on for 2 months before he was fully cut loose from the team, and that ultimately brings us to the present, as he signed with the New Orleans Saints practice squad in the middle of the 2023 season, and stuck around with the reserves contract by the end of it. However, he didn't make the 2024 53-man roster and got waived before this newest season could even begin. All in all, this was a very brutal period for Robinson. I believe that his fall off was due to a few different reasons. The first was Urban Meyer. Had Meyer given him the full keys to the offense from week 1, Robinson could have proved himself more as somebody who could contribute long term. Instead, he got bounced back and forth in the backfield alongside Carlos Hyde, and later tore his Achilles right when Meyer got fired and he started to see more carries. This meant that he would miss the entire offseason, which was crucial due to a new coaching staff coming in with Doug Peterson leading the way, and on top of not being able to impress them, Etienne was just as young and looked great due to being fully healthy. Jacksonville knew that Robinson held some draft value and got rid of him before they really even got a chance to see what he can do. Once James Robinson left Jacksonville, other teams didn't have much faith in his abilities. The Jets gave him a shot and he did well. Now, he can't even land a 53-man roster spot. It's a true shame because I loved James Robinson when he entered the league and, hey, even won a fantasy football league because of him. For those 2 reasons, he was one of my favorite players, and it frustrated me watching Carlos Hyde steal his carries. Thanks again, Urban Meyer. And if you're still wondering why I blame Meyer and included all of that information about his collegiate coaching history, it's because I do believe he picked favorites. I feel like after so many allegations that were made about his toxic personality behind the scenes, some of them likely had some truth to it. He might deny the circle of trust, but with the way he utilized Robinson early on, it did feel like he picked favorites and J-Rob wasn't one of them. It is just brutally unfortunate that he later tore his Achilles when Meyer left, and obviously didn't really get a chance to compete for his job. Anyway, with all of that being said, that does it for this video on the rise and fall of James Robinson. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe because it helps this channel out a ton. Also, leave a comment down below if you were there to experience this crazy short-lived run that Robinson had with the Jaguars. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Possibly about Philip Lindsay, I don't know.